I just really want gold and silver to begin to move up a bit, and then people will be interested, and then life is a lot more interesting for all of us.
Howdy folks, welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and today is Tuesday, August the 8th, 2017, and I have the great honor and very distinct pleasure of welcoming back to the show Mr. Alasdair Macleod, and he is the head of research over at goldmoney.com. Alasdair, welcome back.
It's my pleasure, Rory.
Well, I'm sure glad that you're here. We have a lot to cover as far as what's going on out in the world of gold. And let's just jump right in. What do you say?
Well, good idea.
I don't know if you saw this a couple of days ago, but there was an article that was published out of the Global Times of China where there was did you see that? Where that analyst for the Bank of Commerce or Bank of Commercials or something like that,
yep,
estimated China to have officially 20,193 tons, which is in line with what you said probably 5 years ago.
Well, it's not really, because what he's counting there, the bulk of it is actually in private hands. I reckon that the Chinese government itself, the state, has in various accounts probably more than 20,000 tons.
Yeah.
So in other words, you have to add the private sector holdings, which from memory, he was saying that that's about what was it? About 16,000 tons, something like that.
Yes.
So it would be 20 plus 16, 36 to 40,000 tons, I would say, between the state and the people.
So that's an unbelievable amount of gold.
Well, it is, but you've got to bear in mind that the Chinese government started accumulating gold back from 1983, and it's pursued a very aggressive policy towards gold. I mean, the reason it's the largest gold miner in the world is because the state has forced, if you like, the mines to mine. I mean, a lot of what they mine, I doubt if it's profitable, but they have gone gung ho on getting in gold. And the other thing is that the state owns all the refineries, and the refineries buy in gold and silver doré from abroad. And where does that go? It stays in China. So I mean, we're not talking about a government that has sort of casually acquired a bit here and a bit there. No, as a deliberate act of policy, they've diversified away from the dollar into gold. And what's shown in the official reserves is actually, it must be a very, very small portion of the total.
Now, what do you think their plans are for all this gold? I mean, are they going to make more coins? They're going to make more jewelry? I mean, or is it just they're just gonna acquire all of these costs and dedicate all the resources to storing all this gold so it can gather dust? I mean, what's the point?
Well, logically, they will eventually put the yuan on the gold standard. They will probably have to do that anyway, simply because they want to do away with using the dollar for trade. So what they have to do is to encourage people to no longer accept the dollar, but to accept the yuan. And I think that people will only accept the yuan without gold backing to a fairly limited extent. So eventually that's what they must do.
Now, this guy, the author of this article, went on to discuss how he basically said exactly what you said, that they're acquiring all the gold to, in his words, create a cushion, a buffering for the yuan's downward pressure and stabilizing the yuan's exchange rate. To me, that sounds like gold is currently part of the global monetary system. If it's not, then how would gold provide a, quote, cushion or buffering of the yuan's downward pressure and stabilizing the yuan's exchange rate. If it's not part of the current global monetary system, it would have zero impact on any currency. Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Gold is still very much part of the international monetary system. It is the only form of money which isn't someone else's counterparty risk. That is why central banks own it, and that's why particularly Asian central banks in the countries that are growing most rapidly and where the greatest economic potential is, the central banks of those countries are very keen to accumulate gold rather than dollars. And there are two reasons for this. One is the status of gold itself and the protection that it brings as sound money to an economy. The other is quite simply they don't want every transaction they have reflected in a bank account back in New York, which they do, which is the case if they use dollars.
If it is in fact, this shadow money, I mean, I don't understand how that would work, Alasdair. Can you help me to understand? If I'm using Federal Reserve notes and you're using pound sterling and the people in China are using the yuan, I mean, how does gold impact that?
For a start, let's just go back a little bit. The reason that all dollar transactions are reflected in the bank account in New York is because the international banking system works on a correspondence basis, so that if I, as a banker in London, have a dollar account, my dollar account is effectively with Citibank in New York or JP Morgan in New York or whoever it will be. Now, if one of my customers wants to sell a whole load of dollars in return for trade of some sort, then that will go through my bank account, my correspondent's bank account in New York, which will be Citibank or JP Morgan. Equally, the other side of the transaction, that amount of money is reflected in the bank that receives the money, which again is credited, if it's not an American bank, it is credited to a bank account in New York with a correspondent bank. So the understanding and the analysis that both the banking system and the American intelligence network can put together in terms of understanding the trade that is going on amongst its enemies, as well as just general information, becomes extremely important. And that is something that China wants to avoid. So she has got to try as much as possible, and this is her policy already, to persuade people to do trade settlement with her in Chinese yuan and not use the dollar. Now, where gold comes in is quite simple, and that is that if you for most trading nations, if you offer a gold guarantee, we go back to the pre-Nixon shock times, then that is going to make your currency a lot more attractive and a lot more stable, because gold is an integral part of the financial system and it's no counterparty's risk. So, if you actually have the guarantee of gold, then basically you're not exposed to a central bank which habitually prints money and a banking system that issues credit out of thin air. So, immediately you've got a far better deal than you have with the dollar. And the Chinese know this, the Russians know this, and that is the way they're going, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and remember also that the other thing that's so interesting in this is that China deliberately, in 2002, permitted her nationals, her citizens, to buy and sell gold. And this was the first time. Until then, it was banned. And this was why the Shanghai Gold Exchange was set up at about that time. Now, you have to ask yourself, if China has been accumulating gold and has gone to the trouble of opening all sorts of mines to ensure that she gets maximum production, which she can keep, and she owns all the refineries and is importing dorry from other countries and keeping the proceeds of that and paying dollars for it, then you have to ask yourself, why is it that she then turns around and lets her own citizens acquire gold? And the answer, there's only one possible answer to that, and that is that by 2002, China felt that she had sufficient gold for strategic purposes, strategic and monetary purposes for the future, in the hands of the state. From that point, it becomes important to ensure that the diverse ethnic groups in China actually accumulate gold as individuals, because it is only if you've got the individuals holding gold and understanding what gold is that you can really turn gold into as part of your own currency settlement system. Like going back to pre-1933 in America.
Right.
People have got to hold gold in order to be able to take the benefit of it. And I think you can also produce an argument, which quite simply is that if people hold gold as part of their savings, then they are likely, or less likely, if you like, to be at each other's throats, in a civil disturbance if some sort of trouble breaks out. In other words, if you actually have wealth stored in gold, you are more likely to be peaceable than if you just got paper currency. This isn't something I can prove, but instinctively I feel that this is right, and I know from observing other people that their gold savings to them are so much more important than, let us say, some sort of political bandwagon. Let's go out and protest against this and protest against that. No, if you've actually got proper savings to protect, you will protect those savings. You're not going to upset apple carts. And I'm sure that is part of the whole rationale behind the Chinese approach to gold. So inevitably, they are moving towards putting the yuan on some sort of exchangeable basis with gold.
Now, back in February, when China was celebrating their new year, the WeChat app that's available in China, there was actually $14.5 million equivalent that traded back and forth across this WeChat app. And it was gold in the red envelopes that were presented as gifts, and people could actually go into the bank and say, zap my phone and give me the gold. I mean, is that where we're headed to, in your opinion? I mean, we've got all of this digital noise with the cryptocurrencies going on. This has been introduced. China's sitting on all this gold. This is to say nothing of what Russia announced yesterday, that forget everything. We're getting out of the Federal Reserve note as quickly as possible. And
exactly.
As you're well aware, China and Russia are very close allies. So I would imagine that as one goes, the other one will soon follow. Or am I just is all of this that I've just described, is it just way out of line with what you see?
No, not at all. It's completely in line with what I see. I mean, the one thing which we in the West have forgotten is that gold is money. They have not forgotten that in Asia. The Asian continent basically is populated by roughly half the world's population, people who will save automatically in gold and spend paper currency. And I'll give you an example. Indonesia, for example. That's a country of 260 odd million people. It's a very, very big country. The rupiah as a currency is a very weak currency. It continually goes down and down and down and down. There is in Jakarta a network of gold pawn shops, which facilitates the use of gold, if you like, in transactions. So what people do is that they will spend their day-to-day money, buying beers, buying food, and all the rest of it, out of rupiah. But when it comes to a capital project, like let's say a taxi driver has got to buy a new taxi, or whatever, then what he will do is he'll take his gold along to one of the pawn shops, and he will borrow rupiah against it, and he will buy back. He will redeem that. He will get that gold back, if you like, out of the earnings from his taxi. This is the way in which capital spending is done in Asia. Gold is used for that purpose. The same is also true in India. I mean, we know that farmers, for example, they have a bad harvest, then they pawn some gold in order to buy the seed corn or to see themselves through, and then they hope for a better harvest the following year. This is the way it works in Asia. I mean, the fact that we have forgotten this in Europe and America, and we actually think that the paper stuff that the bank gives us and the central bank prints and now wants to take away from us, and what we have in our deposit accounts in the bank, we think that's money. No, it is not genuine money. It is government money. And this is something which we have forgotten, but the Asians haven't. And from China and Russia's point of view, they are, they would be very silly not to harness this enormous power of understanding what true money is, what sound money is, because it's something that we in the West actually have discarded, and we've discarded it, leaving our currencies exposed to a complete collapse of their purchasing power. I mean, already you see that central banks are telling us that they want the purchasing power of their currencies to go down 2% every year. Well, do you know what? Since 1969, or 1968, when the gold pool started failing, and gold was $35 an ounce. Since then, measured in gold, the dollar has gone down over 97%. And now they're talking about a further 2% every year.
How much can be left?
This one is a no-brainer. It really is. For anyone who actually sits and thinks about it, it is actually very, very simple. Gold is money. The stuff government gives you is pretense. It's,
Yes.
And the Chinese are not falling for it. They really are not falling for it. They don't want to have anything to do with it, nor does Russia. Their plans for the Asian continent basically is to turn that into a huge, great power block, which will allow them to dominate the world. And part of that plan has to be sound currency, sound money.
Now, we learned, I think it was about 2 years ago, Alasdair, from Koos Jansen's research, where he documented a meeting between one of the directors in Kazakhstan with the director, the main person at the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This was a formal meeting. This meeting was for the specific purpose of discussing gold as payment along the Belt and Road Initiative, the New Silk Road, whatever it is, whatever they're calling it, the Belt and Road Initiative. So we already know that that's in the works. Now, we know that China has been encouraging their citizens to acquire gold, and I believe exactly as you described, the government has what they need in order to feel comfortable, and in order for it to work properly, the citizens have to understand, have to hold, have to use gold. But what about Russia? I've not heard that Putin or the Russian government is encouraging their citizens to acquire gold, and we all know that India is trying desperately to strip their citizens of their gold, which they failed at every turn. But
these are two different stories, Rory.
Okay.
Let's start with Russia first. Russia has got as far. I mean, the state, if you like, understands what it is doing. I think it is rather neglected what the Russian people might be doing. There is a sales tax on the purchase of gold in Russia. Now, I do understand from people associated with this problem that there are moves to change that. And I suspect that in the next 2 or 3 or 4 months, we will hear the Russians actually announce that they are removing sales taxes from gold. So that, if you like, will then allow ordinary Russians to begin to accumulate gold.
Okay.
India is a very, very different story. The amount of gold that the Indian private sector has is in the order of, I think they say something like 20,000 tons. I personally think it's a bit less than that, but we won't argue. We won't argue over 5,000 tons or so. The government has very little gold. It bought 200 odd tons off the IMF when the IMF did its last sale, which was about 10 years ago, I think. And it had some gold. I don't know what the total is without looking it up, but we're talking about considerably less than 1,000 tons. It's probably, I have a feeling it's somewhere around in the region of about 600 tons. Now, India has just joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization this year.
Yes,
they joined. I think it was in June. So this is very, very recent. Their problem with this is that they can't hold up their end, as it were, in a gold-centric Asia with the amount of gold that they've actually got. Equally, you have to know that the Bank of England is the chief advisor to the Reserve Bank of India. Whenever they need help, whenever they need, an appointment or whatever, the Bank of England is always consulted on this. The Bank of England is very much part of the Bank of International Settlements cartel, which is trying to stop central banks accumulating more gold in a market where there isn't very much physical supply. Because they know if the price of gold runs away, it's curtains for fiat currencies. So India, if you like, has the route of actually going into the market and buying gold for the state effectively closed off. In any event, there isn't the liquidity in the market for India to do this without driving up the price quite significantly. I mean, if you want to acquire 1,000 tons, you're up against Russia in the market, you're up against China and the Chinese citizens, you're up against your own citizens, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason this matters is that in joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they need more gold. It's as simple as that. So What do? They try and come up with schemes whereby their citizens will provide that gold to the state. And this is just, everything they do has got this written all over it. So that's the Indian story, and it's a very, very different one from Russia.
That sheds a whole different light, and I hadn't even thought about that angle of why they want the citizens' gold, so why they're so desperate to get it away from them. I just figured that it was to further enslave the people, but what you've just explained makes a lot more sense, that they're desperate for gold. I mean, if India or any country were to go into the market and start and put an order out there for, say, 1,000 tons, that would be shockwaves. Period.
Absolutely. There is another small aspect to this, which supports the theory that India doesn't want her citizens to import any more gold, and that is that India is effectively run by Keynesian economists. Right. All the economic establishment there are thoroughly Keynesian. They do not understand that the origin of a trade deficit is a faster rate of expansion of credit money and government deficits. That inevitably is what leads to the trade deficit, not if you like, the level of the rupee or whatever. I mean, this is something which is actually very fundamental, and it seems that so few modern economists understand. Let me just put it into a context. With sound money, if I trade with you in America, you're trading with me in Britain, you're not going to trade with me unless I can actually afford to pay for the goods that you're going to buy, that I'm going to buy. You're not going to just take it. And, you might do it once, and then next time you say, hold on a minute. Last time I traded with Alasdair, he didn't pay his bloody bill. I'm not having that again.
Exactly.
So with sound money, everything balances. This is the point. With unsound money, money which is credit, which can be expanded at will, what happens is that I agree to buy something off you. I then go to my bank and say, hey, I've just spent £1 million on some fancy equipment I'm buying off Rory in America. Can you lend me £1 million so that I can pay the bill? And the bank says, of course, sir. Yes. Well, I mean, I wish. But you can see the point that it is the expansion of credit that allows the trade deficit to occur. Now, why this matters with Russia is that the Keynesian economists are looking at it the other way. What they see is people importing up to 1,000 tons of gold a year, and they're saying, people are spending all this money on gold. If they didn't spend this money on gold, we would have an enormous trade surplus. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
They just, the Keynesian economists don't actually understand money. That I'm afraid is our starting point in understanding how stupid the whole system is. If they did understand money, then this wouldn't be a problem. But you can see that you've now got the government full of these economists who sort of think, well, all this gold being imported. You then go to the next step and say the government needs gold for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization membership in order for it to hold up its position there and be able to trade and all the rest of it. Yet, all this gold has come in from abroad. We don't want to buy more gold from abroad. We can't anyway because, the Bank of International Settlements discourages us from doing so, and we are, of course, on side with them. It's completely wrong that all these people have got gold and we've got none. And it's all the proceeds of going out and ruining our trade balance. So you can see how this sort of ridiculous argument gets traction in India, and that's basically what's happened.
Yeah, the Keynesians, economists that don't understand money. Now there's a fraud for you.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness! I mean, that would be like me being trying to be a civil engineer, and I don't know the first thing about construction.
Well, it's worse, Rory. I might drive over the bridge that you have just. I might not drive over the bridge that you have just built. But on the other hand, when it comes to money, my money is being ruined.
Exactly.
I have no choice in the matter.
Exactly. And that concludes part 1 of this in-depth conversation with Alasdair Macleod. And if you will click the screen where it says so, then it will take you directly to part 2, where we will pick up exactly where we left off.